Hi, my name is Matthew Guillen, and I'm the reference coordinator at the VMHC. Welcome to Recipes Remade. Our new series about food and beverage history in Virginia will be recreating recipes from the past and talking about how they relate to our present. For our first video, I'll be making a traditional holiday recipe from the mid-19th century. Follow our series at virginiahistory.org/recipesremade. And be sure to let us know if you try making the recipe yourself. Be sure to tag us on social media at Virginia History on Facebook and Instagram, and Virginia Museum on Twitter. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so today I'm making Malinda Russell's drop ginger cake from her domestic cookbook, published in 1866, right after the Civil War. Malinda Russell was a free woman of color who owned a pastry shop for about 6 years. And that's apparent from her recipes. You can tell that they assume a lot of knowledge and don't always spell everything out that you need to know to make it. So it's clear they're intended for experienced cooks, but not to worry, we're going to figure it out. This ginger cake seemed like a good one to try because unlike a lot of her other recipes, she hints at the oven temperature, gives mostly consistent measurements, and all of the ingredients she uses are readily available today. But there are also some things that are left out or unclear, so it's a good example of how we usually need to make adjustments and do some guesswork when adapting historic recipes for the modern kitchen. For instance, Russell says to drop the unbaked dough into a buttered dripping pan. Bake moderately without scorching. Those are the oven temperature and baking time instructions. But now a 19th century dripping pan it's something like this. It's something like a 9 by 13 baking dish. Something that most people would have had in their homes in the 19th century. And it's called a dripping pan, or was, because you would literally set it under roasting meat to catch the drippings. Now, this is a little vague because it seems to suggest that Russell means for us to bake this gingerbread as a single big cake. But after playing around with it, I'm pretty sure that these are actually cookies. So let's look at the recipe. Russell says that you will need molasses, sugar, sour cream, eggs, butter, baking soda, cream of tartar, and, of course, ground ginger. The amount she gives, though, will make something like 3 dozen cookies. And if you need 3 dozen cookies, then by all means go for it. But I definitely don't need 3 dozen cookies in my teeny tiny kitchen. So I've scaled this recipe down a bit. I've also converted her measurements from volume to weight because it's more accurate and it gives more consistent results if you do it that way. But no worries if you don't have kitchen scales. I'll give both volume and weight measures, so you could do that too. Now, what you may have noticed is that she doesn't give an oven temperature, but just says to bake moderately. That's going to be about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, if you have an old-fashioned knob on your oven like I do on mine, that's going to be right in the middle. So go ahead and preheat the oven. Now, Russell mentions the flour, but she doesn't say how much. Just that you put in the soda and cream of tartar in the flour, and that you'll need enough of it to make a, quote, stiff batter, almost a dough. So after playing around with that, I think she means about 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. That's 304 grams. So to the flour, which I've got here, you're going to add a teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, and 2 teaspoons of ground ginger. So go ahead and whisk that together until it's nice and combined. I wanted to mention at this point, too, that the baking soda and cream of tartar as a leavener in this gingerbread is interesting because it's only about by the mid-19th century, the period we're at now with this cookbook, that it had really come into regular use, that baking soda had come into regular use. Basically, there are 3 ways to leaven baked goods. Naturally using yeast or sourdough, mechanically using whipped eggs. You can use butter and get layers of pastry that expand when that gets hot, like for croissants or puff pastry. You can even beat dough, like you do for beaten biscuits, which are native to the Tidewater of Virginia and Maryland. But then there's chemical leaveners, and those are things like baking powders and baking sodas. The earliest chemical leaveners were things like pearl ash or potash, and that's an alkaline found in wood ashes. The first recorded use of this is probably in Amelia Simmons's American Cookery book from 1796, but it was almost certainly used by Native Americans long before that to leaven cornbreads. Like the name suggests, potash is another name for potassium bicarbonate, whereas modern baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. Today, we're used to the taste of sodium in baked goods, but potassium not so much. And both are pretty strong chemical flavors if you're not used to them. So it's not really any surprise that some of the earliest recipes to use potash or baking sodas were spicy, strongly flavored gingerbreads. So next, you're going to need a half cup or 190 grams of molasses. And to that, you're going to add about 5 tablespoons or 68 grams of salted butter. So that goes all together in a pot. And what you're going to do is melt that together gently over medium heat. Definitely do try to use the salted butter if you can. Historically, butter was always salted as a preservative. In fact, you'll see a lot of recipes from this period that will tell you to first wash the salt out of the butter before using it because it was so packed in salt to keep it. You can definitely use unsalted butter, but if you do, be sure then you add a good pinch of salt into the recipe to balance out all the sugar that's in it. So over medium heat, you want to melt together the butter and the molasses and really just until it's melted. You don't need to boil it. And then as soon as it's melted together, you can just set it aside while you carry on with the rest of the recipe. And this is how it should look when it's all nice and melted together. So just take it off the heat at this point and set it aside while you continue with the rest of the recipe. So once that's set aside, Russell says to beat together the sugar and the egg. Now I'm going to use a stand mixer because I have one, and I'm pretty sure that if Malinda Russell had one, she would have used it too. Obviously, you can do this by hand if you really want the authentic experience. All right, so that's 1 large egg going into the mixing bowl here. That followed by 1/2 cup or 60 grams of just white granulated sugar. Go ahead and mix that until it's light and fluffy. So next is the sour cream. It's 1/3 cup, 73 grams. Russell never actually says when to add the sour cream in, but I'm going to add it now to the sugar and the egg because the next thing after this that we're going to add is the hot molasses and the butter. And we want to be careful that we don't cook the egg. So if we add some of the cool sour cream first, that will help to prevent that. Once it's in, you can go ahead and stream in the butter and the molasses. Give it another scrape down. So now we're going to stream in the butter and the molasses. I would go ahead and do it on somewhat of a low heat, or excuse me, a low speed so that we don't splash hot butter and molasses everywhere. Let's see, can we see that? Let's try. Scrape it down again. So now we're going to start working in the dry ingredients until it's all combined. But be careful not to over mix it, because if you work it in, if you work it too much, the flour will start to develop gluten, which is exactly what you want if you're making nice chewy bread. But we want these cakes to be light and tender, so don't over mix it. Give it a scrape down. So at this point, what you want to do is line some baking sheets with baking parchment, or you can grease them with butter like Russell suggests. And then you can either use 2 spoons to drop dollops of the batter. I'm going to be using an ice cream scoop because it's easier to use with one hand while I'm filming. So just like, about a tablespoonful. Place them on the baking sheet. You will want them a good few inches apart because they will spread a fair bit. They're ready for the oven at this point. Can you see them there? I think you just can. They're going to go into a 350-degree oven for about 10 minutes, or until they're just getting golden brown on the edges and they look a little cracked and cooked on top. So when these are done baking, after about 10 minutes, let's see. Yep, they should look a little bit cracked slightly on the tops. And then you can just take them out of the oven, set them on a wire rack to let them cool, and leave them on the rack for about 10 minutes to finish setting up. And there you go. So they're done. They're out of the oven. I'm going to pick one to show you. So they're light and they're soft and fluffy. They're like maybe like a muffin top cookie or half of the cake part of a whoopie pie. But I think they're really good if you break one open and see what it looks like. Let's see. It's not too bad. Have a taste. Again, soft texture. It's spicy from the ginger. It's really good. Give them a shot and let us know how it goes.